All right, it looks like it's settled down quite a bit. I'll let my colleague join us and introduce himself real quickly. He'll be on the back end. So Doug, why don't you start here?
Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time you're tuning in from, good, whatever. My name is Doug Harrington. I'm one of the admissions counselors here for Binghamton University. I am a Binghamton alum. I did graduate in 2016 and 2017 with both my bachelor's and master's in business administration, respectively. And I've been in this role ever since. So if we include my time as a student, it's been around 7 years here at the university, and I've enjoyed every single second of it. I am really happy to be here to help you through the college admissions process. I know it can be daunting, but that's what we're here for. We're here to help, whether it be like Craig said about Binghamton or about any other institution. We can try to help as much as we possibly can. So I'll be chilling on the back end. Like I said, put any questions you have in the Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen, and I'll be sure to get to them, or might save them to the end. So if you don't see them quite answered right away, they might be answered at the end. So just a heads up on that one. So thanks so much for joining, and I do hope you enjoy the session.
Thank you, Doug. And Doug will be on the back end, as you mentioned, but this is where we really want to be able to help you. So we'll come back live, or Doug will come back live at the end to answer some of those questions with me that you have. So my name is Craig Broccoli. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions at Binghamton University, which is sitting right behind me in this image. This is Binghamton in the early morning hours, looking out down towards the city of Binghamton in the far distance. Like Doug, I actually did study at Binghamton as well. I studied there as an undergrad in our engineering college and then business for graduate school. So I truly enjoyed my time. I lived on campus all my years there. I live in the New York City area now for Binghamton as the Associate Director of Admissions. But for the last 10 years, my role has been helping students and families like yourselves find that pathway to Binghamton or other schools very much like Binghamton. So I want to make sure that we get into some of the core aspects of what an application would be, a successful application, all the aspects of your application for that matter. So that's what this session will be about. We will certainly get into some of the questions about Binghamton specifics, and feel free to ask those, but listen in for the core part of the beginning, which will be more about the things you should be paying attention to at this time of year and all the other things that you should be looking forward to and making sure that you successfully get to the colleges that you want to get to. So this is what we would call overall a application experience, right? And a college admissions experience for that matter. But there's one big piece of that. You have to apply in order to be reviewed, in order to be successful on the path that you're looking for. So I'm actually going to share my screen right now and take us through what would be, I hope, a fairly comprehensive but brief overview, so we have some time for that question side. Now, this is your application from start to finish. And by application, I can make that plural and say applications, right? Because you would ideally be applying to more than one school. But generally speaking, the application piece is fairly similar across the board, right? This is the core contents of who you are as a student, as a learner, as a person in general. Colleges, frankly, the admissions offices, no matter what college you're looking at, we're looking for ways to find a pathway for you. We're looking for ways to say, yes, we want students on our campus. We're not looking for the reasons to say, no, this is not a good fit. But ultimately, what we're looking for is the right path for our incoming class, our incoming students. And ideally, you're looking for the right college that you're going to do your best at. Now, the overarching overview here, the timeline, as we would say, has many components. There's the search. Many of you, if you're seniors, you probably completed the search part. If you're juniors right now, you are starting the search, or maybe even earlier than that, searching for the schools that really hit that right mark for what would be a good fit. I'll get into that in 1 second. There's the application or the applying phase, which for seniors, you're in it right now. That's a big piece of what we're going to speak about. Then the deciding role, both on the college end and then, of course, on your end, deciding where you're going to enroll, which is the last part, which is enrolling in that school that you ultimately decide is the right spot for you. So to briefly touch on the search, some of you are just completing that phase now. Even for seniors, it's okay to be finalizing the search stage, meaning you're still in the process of getting ready to apply. What you're looking at is a list of schools that ultimately not only will you be accepted to or think you'll be accepted to, it's okay to be unsure about that, but meaning schools that you think academically you would fit in at. And some of these might be schools called reach schools where you're a little below their numbers, their averages, but they really resonate with you. Others might be schools you fit right in the middle of what they would say are their middle 50% scores. We can get into some of that in just a bit. And others are schools that you know clearly you're above their typical averages, above their average standards, but it still is a school that you really see a good fit at. And frankly, every single one of the schools on your list that you're applying to, you have to like that school. You have to feel excited to some degree about that school. And that excitement can grow or it can fade. But these are things that at the stage of your search that you really want to find that level of, hey, I think I would fit in at that school to some degree. Now, the exploration part is kind of what you're all doing right now. This is an open house week in December. You're here exploring at least Binghamton. We live in a world right now that gave us all opportunities that we never had before. There's a silver lining in this virtual world is that you can see things that you never saw before on a college campus. Colleges are able to show things that we weren't ever able to show for. Doug, who's on the back end, who was influential in bringing up a Campus 360 program at Binghamton University, where you can see different aspects of campus that you probably weren't able to see on a tour if you were visiting campus in person. What I'm getting at is we want all of our students, and frankly, all of you should be exploring consistently throughout this year. It's not something that you can get done in 1 week. All right, let me go look at all my colleges now. You should be tuning in, doing these sessions, 30-minute sessions, going onto a Zoom chat, doing all these different aspects to explore, is this school the right fit for you? Which gets into those questions, right? Diving into what type of classroom environment am I looking for? What type of student body do I resonate with? Am I a collaborative student? Is the vibe I'm getting from all this different content that I'm exploring, is it giving me a collaborative vibe, or am I more of a competitive student? Is the college showcasing some of the more independent, competitive work that the students are doing? These are all the things you should be questioning and thinking about. And frankly, that means asking questions. And it could be via the chat like you might do right now. It could be unmuting your mic if it's a session that allows for that and asking a question to an admissions representative or a current student on that college campus. This is your opportunity to do that. And for the shy students, which I was back when I was looking at colleges, listen in. If your parents or your support figures or your older siblings are giving you advice on a question to ask, take that question. If you don't know what to ask, use those questions. That's a good starting point. Now, the application part, which is, again, what the content of what I really want to hone in on today, this is making sure that you have all the information necessary for those colleges that you're interested in. And for Binghamton, it's a pretty straightforward process. So I'm highlighting the ones that we use. And frankly, you would pick one of these three application platforms. Some of you already submitted your application. Great. We'll get into this timeline in just a second. Actually, many of you already submitted an application, which is quite normal for Binghamton. We have usually over 40,000 students applying. 40,000 students from all over the world will be applying to Binghamton every year for about 3,000 first-year spots. So we're selective, but we're trying to work through all of your applications to make sure we're finding the right fit for you and for us. Now, the application types, there's the common application, which is most common because a lot of colleges are on the common app. There's the coalition application, which is another universal application platform. Many colleges are on that. And the SUNY application platform, which many of the SUNYs are on. Now, you would pick the one that works the best for you. If every one of your colleges are on the common app, sure, that seems like it would make sense. If all of your schools are on the coalition app, okay, that might make sense for you. If you're only applying to certain SUNYs and that was the only application that you saw fit, great. They're basically asking you for the same information. They're just going through a third party in a different way. So one would go through SUNY, one would go through Coalition, one would go through Common App, and eventually it gets to Binghamton. Now, with that comes in this other piece, application fees. So I want to call out the fee waiver part of the process here. There are always going to be students who qualify for application fee waiver. I'm going to show you some of those in a screenshot at the end. Generally speaking, though, Binghamton as a university, we're a state university, we're a public school. We don't offer fee waivers. We actually don't control the application fee. It's hosted by a third party. So our only role in this process is being able to approve a fee waiver. And that fee waiver needs to meet the standards that the state of New York requires for a fee waiver approval. So these aren't things that we're determining at Binghamton. These are things that are predetermined already. A lot of it is income-based or situational based, so which is also based on family income, right? If you qualify for SAT or ACT fee waiver, College Board fee waiver, free and reduced lunch, if that's something that you have an opportunity at your school for, there are a number of opportunities that you could qualify for a fee waiver, but it's not just a determination that Binghamton will be making just based on your own individual situation. So that's the tricky part. Whereas some private colleges and universities, they have a lot more freedom to make that decision. So I always recommend that if you think finances are tight, which I know they are this year for many, many families, be wise and ask colleges how that process would work. It's a little tricky for the state schools to qualify for a fee waiver if you don't already meet the standards that are set by the state of that where that college is hosted. Now, with that being said, there is always that process of a fee waiver approval through a committee. Just make sure you're asking these questions, and I'll again show you some of what these fee waivers would look like. Now, in terms of deadlines, applying to colleges, every college out there probably has some variation of this. The schools on your list, the one that you built on your search list, you should be in the know. What is their application deadlines? What do they look like? For Binghamton, we have early action and regular decision. So early action, which came up on November 1st, that was the early action deadline for juniors. Think forward. That's a great time to apply by if you're ready to go by the fall. Now, early action is a early review period, which means we're reviewing applications for early action right now. Many of you may have already applied for early action. We release decisions typically anywhere from late November, December into mid-January. This year, it's a little slower, but we'll probably have those decisions. We will have all our early action decisions out by mid-January. Now, what that does is let you know sort of where you stand in the process. The advantage is it kind of gets the weight off your shoulders a bit if you were ready to go, but it also gives you some perspective of kind of where you fit on one of those schools on your list. Now, the regular decision timeframe, that is coming up. That deadline for that, I should say, is coming up. That's January 15th, typically. Again, every college out there may have a different variation of that deadline, but it is giving you that opportunity to make sure you're doing everything right. You're working through your senior year to make sure that you got every piece of your application set and then applying, not rushing through this. With that being said, just because there's a deadline in the future doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing the work now. And especially this year, on the admissions end, we know this is difficult. We know there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of unknowns, and there's not a lot of support maybe coming from the traditional ways, maybe from your high school in a way that you're used to. And we're here to help. So be rest assured that we want to make sure that you can get to that next stage. And if you're interested in applying to our colleges, and I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of colleges and universities, work with that admissions office. We want to make sure that we're finding where your stumbling blocks are and we can help you pass that. But the thing you got to do is you got to start, right? This is something that I would say it's waiting tends to bring stress, tends to bring a rushed application, which in the long run might not lead to the best possible decision for you. The pieces of the application, what we would say gathering your supporting materials, this is in addition. So the application platform will give us, the colleges, your basic contact, demographic info, all the things you're doing outside the classroom, your extracurriculars. It's going to give us the core contents of you. It's going to give us your essay, your letter. Your essay right there is your personal statement. That's going to be giving us an inside scoop to who you are. And that's one of those things that I know a lot of you stress about because, well, how do I showcase the best of me? Your essay, and I'm just giving a little bit of due diligence here, is not about simply trying to impress a college. It's simply about letting a college know how you think, how you communicate, what inspires you, maybe something that you overcome. And I'm giving a variety of examples. They don't have to cover all of those at once. It's simply a way of us getting a better idea of who you are. So don't stress about the essay. And if that's the thing that is stressing you the most right now, definitely reach out to the admissions office or to colleagues like your high school counselors or English teachers or those who have gone through the college process before to get just some extra motivation there. But the other materials, the things that what we're going to hone in on to add to your application, these are usually coming outside of your application itself, right? This is your transcript that's coming from your 4 years. Well, frankly, for those of you who are seniors now, the 3 years of work at high school plus your current grades, your letters of recommendation, which is, in our case, we only require one, a supporting document from a counselor or a teacher, your test scores, and I'll get into that in a second, and any additional information depending on the program that you might be specifically applying for. So let me go back to the transcripts. This is the most important part of the review for the vast majority of colleges. We want to know academically how you've done over time. And for a place like Binghamton, which as mentioned is a selective institution, the majority of our students applying are doing well. They're doing really well. They're on a path where they're usually on an upward trend, or they've done well all along. And that's great. And all of you, when I say that, when 40,000 students apply, all of you have your own academic storyline. That's what makes it interesting. We're comprised of a student body that all have different academic storylines, though maybe more similar than not, meaning in our case, they're doing quite well. We want to find you where you're at and see, all right, is this a good fit academically for our institution? We're often looking at your weighted GPA in high school, but where did that GPA come from? What did each course kind of add up to? How did you recover if you had a stumbling block that happened sophomore year or junior year? These are things that we're going to hone in on, but it comes from your high school. So it's a little bit more of a hands-off. You usually follow the process that your high school is requiring for getting your application sent, but also your transcript and supporting documents sent. The letter of recommendation, this is something for the seniors you probably should have asked for by now, right? A counselor or a teacher. We only require one. You could send more than one, but it has to typically come via email after that. And it's not necessary that you have an additional letter of rec. Many colleges out there require more than one, so I would assume some of you have more than one all ready to go. But this is coming from a teacher or a counselor that can support you as a student, meaning they can talk a little bit more about you in the high school environment, even in the virtual environment. They can speak a little bit more about your involvement within the school community, or how you've done in a particular class, or maybe how you've evolved and matured in a certain subject matter that wasn't your best. So there's a lot of ways that you can look at this. The key here is, though, you have to be on the front end of this. You got to ask a teacher or counselor, hey, could you write a supportive letter of recommendation for me in a nice way, nicer than what I just said there? And they will be able to say yes or no, or, hey, you know what? I might not be the right one, but your math teacher could probably be a good support figure here for you. And then you have to also provide that info. What are you doing outside the classroom? What are you doing inside the classroom? What are some areas of interest that you're looking to get into in the future? So they can kind of vouch for you on that front. So that might be a document that you send to them. They might have a questionnaire at your school. You got to do the work here. Then your test scores. At a school like Binghamton, historically, testing had been a big piece, but not the biggest piece. So meaning we look at your academic realm very much intently, in the sense that we want to make sure this is the right fit for you. Academic transcript was number one. Number two was always your test scores, SAT or ACT, whichever. And we will super score. We'll take your highest combination. This year, so this upcoming admission cycle, we are test optional. So if you're a senior now, or if you're transferring in from another college, we are test optional for this upcoming academic year, meaning you do not have to submit an SAT or ACT. That's not a requirement in order to be admitted. Now, if you did take the SAT or ACT, you certainly can still submit that if you had the opportunity to do so. If you had the opportunity to take it more than once, you can send in all of the scores and we will super score just as we normally would. That is one option that you certainly have. If you only took it once and you felt like, hey, this wasn't my best sitting, that's okay for this upcoming year. For those seniors out there, that's certainly an opportunity where you can say, you know what, this is not what I'm going to send to a college. I will lean on the other aspects of my application and my supporting materials that will highlight who I am. Now, for juniors, just to jump into the future, or even sophomores, we have no idea what the future holds. Time will tell if we're able to be test optional for the following cycle, meaning a lot of this is determined based on availability of the exam, kind of what the state system in general is looking at, the SUNY system in our case, or the governor's office. So time will tell, but I will say, as I tell every student every year, especially with the growing number of test optional schools that exist out there, regardless of what's happened because of COVID, you should prepare for them as a junior and into that senior year time frame, because you have plenty of time to still take these exams if obviously there's opportunities and locations for you to do that. But what I mean is prepare now for those future exams that you may be taking. It's in your best interest to make sure that you give a shot, try to give an opportunity to yourself to take those exams, because that could add to your application. It could be another piece of it, but do not stress over these things at this point. Colleges, again, are trying to find ways to get you to our campuses. If we see that there is a barrier there, like this year where testing was not a real good availability option, we're going to make amends. We're going to make adjustments for that. So the way that you're doing that, so again, for the seniors right now who've applied, for Binghamton, there's a big change this year. We are test optional, but that also means you have to let us know whether you're submitting or not submitting your test scores. And you certainly could say that on the Common App, but that's something that's universal for all colleges. I will say this, and I'm speaking beyond just Binghamton, many colleges need to know specifically for their college, are you going test optional? For Binghamton, this is the big change. On your application portal or your student portal, so once you apply to a place like Binghamton, you usually get a follow-up email. You're going to get a lot of emails, I'm sure. Binghamton will send you an email that confirms, hey, we received your application. Here's your login information. So basically what you're doing with that login information, you're creating a status checker through your student portal. So you can check the status of your application. Everybody must do this for Binghamton. In that student portal, you'll see a form right down in the middle of the page that says, yes, I want to submit test scores, or no, I do not. You must do that. You must make that decision. Your application will not be complete until you do that, meaning we cannot review your application until you say yes or no on your Binghamton portal. And that's that test optional form. And if you are submitting test scores, or if you said, yes, I want to submit my test scores, and maybe you just took the exam, guess what? You can self-report your scores. You can just type in your scores for free. You don't have to pay College Board to send them to us. Not at this stage by any means. You simply just have to type in your scores, SAT or ACT, right on your student portal. So again, there's another powerful piece of that student portal. Now, there are additional documents depending on the program you're in or applying for. Binghamton, for example, has the EOP program, the Educational Opportunity Program, which is an amazing opportunity for students who are doing quite well, but maybe just falling below our averages. Financially, it's always been a tough thing back at home, wherever you're coming from. The EOP pathway is an excellent pathway as an opportunity track, and there are many other opportunity programs throughout New York State at different colleges, but they often require additional financial review, which additional financial documents. That is something that you always have to be checking your status checker and your email for that, and I'll get into that. Homeschool applicants, there may be some additional documents you need to submit. Special talent review, right? If you want to provide a special talent at Binghamton, starting January 15th, we open up a special talent review process for any student who's still in the application pool there. So if you're an early action decision that got deferred to regular, that's January 15th. Hey, if you have a special talent, speech and debate, dance, music, art, studio art, theater, you can submit a portfolio or a recording in a special talent process. That is something else in addition that you might want to supplement your application with. All right. So what are we doing now? And this is specifically for your seniors. Juniors, you're definitely exploring. I hope you're taking notes now so you're ready to go early next year. But the seniors, you should be applying. Many of you already did. I know that. But apply if you haven't yet when you're ready. And obviously keep the deadlines in mind. You don't want to be going past those deadlines. That definitely could be a deal breaker for some colleges, or it could certainly put you on a pathway that doesn't put you in the right time frame for a true adequate review. So you got to really pay attention to those deadlines. Try not to wait until that deadline. You want to make sure in your mind, at least you're saying, you know what, I'm going to submit that a week before the deadline. Even if there's a little bit of a technical difficulty, you still have some time on that. Now, grades will matter. Senior year grades matter. Your upward trend overall matters, especially if you're starting to apply now. We're probably going to be seeing your mid-year grades. So that means we have a better idea of even how you've done in this new environment. So keep that in motion, keep those upward trends going. Make sure that you're not taking your foot off the pedal here. Ultimately, you're going to be admitted to a college, and ultimately you have to send your final high school transcript to that college. And that's going to be in, say, June, July, sometime in the summer. At that point, colleges see exactly what happened senior year. And if you went in the other direction based on what they admitted you as, that could leave you in a very difficult situation in the middle of the summer saying, hey, the school I decided to go to just said, hey, we're rescinding your application because we did not see strong senior year performance, or we did not see a continuous trend where you took a deep dive and you're not quite ready for our institution yet. So senior year grades do matter. Doesn't mean you have to be well above what your average is now, but you got to keep that consistency going. Now, the FAFSA, your federal financial aid documents. For Binghamton, we only require the FAFSA. We don't require any other documents if you're looking for financial aid. If you're looking for financial support through our financial aid office. That opened up as of October 1st. It's based on taxes from 2 years ago. So you should have the availability if you're using your family's tax forms for this, if you're deciding you're applying for financial aid. At Binghamton, we're a public school, right? So what we're really looking at is state-based financial aid, federal financial aid, and some institutional funds, depending on the year and where we can support our students. We're not typically known as a merit scholarship school, meaning a lot of the funding that we may be able to give out to students has some level of a need component. So you should be completing the FAFSA if you're thinking about any form of financial aid or any form of exterior or partial scholarship that we are able to give out. January 1st is the recommended filing deadline. So make sure you are working to get that done soon, right? And that means submitting it to all the schools that you have applied to. So you might go through it once, submit it to all the schools, and you have to reopen your FAFSA. You don't have to redo it, but then select other schools to add to that. You want to make sure you get that in by January 1st in order to have the adequate time to get your financial status reviewed for what we can give as support, or the state or federal government can give as support. And of course, in this virtual world, you want to be cultivating those good habits. You want to be understanding what it's like to develop if you're taking classes online right now, and where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, what can you improve in? These are things I want you to start thinking about while you have a different learning environment. College is all about adjusting. That's what it is in the long run. You're going to make a big adjustment when you go to college. All of you right now, I'm the least worried about you all. I think you're going to be some of the most resilient college students we've ever seen, which should bode well for the future because this world needs a lot of help. But you're going through changes every day these days. That's a big adjustment, but you're doing a lot of trial and error right now as learners, and I think that's going to be a good thing. Obviously, get organized. Make sure you're getting all your documents set. So when you apply, what do you do after you click submit? You've sent your application in. Again, I know a lot of you already have, and some of you are getting quite ready to do that, maybe this weekend for that matter. Well, you got to be checking your email. Once you hit that send button, you're going to get a follow-up email, usually within a few days at the very latest, that says, hey, we got your application. Here are your next steps. As mentioned, for Binghamton, you got to set up that student portal and that status checker. That's where that test optional form will be sitting, right? You got to make sure you're sitting and sending that in. Again, this is for seniors this year, and I'll show some screenshots at the end. But you always have to be checking your email. Yes, I know you get a lot of emails, especially from colleges, but particularly to the ones you've applied to, you always want to be making sure that you're not missing anything, right? There could be a follow-up document that one school in specifically needs. You don't want to wait until it's too late for that to be taken care of, especially when it gets down to the financial aid components, because that could be a sticky area where you may miss an opportunity that you are fully qualified for, but we want to make sure that you're tuning in. And ultimately, we want to make sure you're tuning into finding the right fit specifically for you, not necessarily for us. We're going to be doing that part. The college admissions office is part of reading your application is us figuring out, hey, is this a good spot where we think you're going to grow as a student, where we think you're going to make our campus better by you being here? But ultimately, you should be doing that same thing. You're going to be looking at schools beyond just your search process, but now for, all right, based on the schools I'm admitted to, what is the one that I think or what are the few that I think I'm going to do my best at? It's okay to have more than one fit, one best fit for that matter even. But what I'm dialing into here is as you progress through your senior year, you're going to start to learn a lot more about yourself. There's certainly going to be some emotional ties to schools, and you'll start to realize, wait, maybe that school is only on my list because I just wanted to see if I'm able to be admitted to that school. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a good fit for you just to try to see if you're admitted. But the school that you get that letter back and you feel not only proud, but excited to say, you know what, I want to be a contributor to that college campus. These are not necessarily schools that you're simply looking at their statistical results, right? Oh, X% get into law school. Maybe I should go there if I want to go to law school. That's a good thing to know, but it doesn't necessarily tell you if that's a good school for you, right? If you're not the student who really likes that campus, you're probably not going to be the student who's on that positive end of the results. Right? You have to actually like the institution you're at. You really have to like the other students there. You have to vibe with those other students. You have to find a way to grow and contribute to that student body. And it doesn't mean every one of you need to be a leader on a college campus. If you're the type who gets inspired by leadership and want to be a leader, yeah, look for the schools that are looking for students like you. Look for the opportunities where maybe you can start an organization on that campus. If you're the type who likes to be a contributing member, but not necessarily on the forefront, but maybe behind the scenes a little bit, that's a good mindset to be at. Look for those organizations on that campus that you think you could be a member in, and really move that organization forward by being there. These are things that take a lot of internal review and a lot of internal exploration, external exploration as well. You're ultimately looking for a school that in 4 years' time, you're going to be happy that you went there, not simply happy that you were admitted there. So that's a different change of thought. I always love working with students down that pathway. In order to get to that pathway, though, you obviously have to do everything I just mentioned, which is completing your application, making sure that you're going through all those possible steps. I see there are quite a few questions flowing in through the Q&A box. I definitely want to get into that. I do want to just showcase a couple of those pieces here. When you are going through your application, you're going, and this is for Binghamton specifically. I'm pulling up a test application. So Tina Fey did not apply to Binghamton. At least I don't know. She didn't apply this year. But this is not really Tina Fey. Thank you. I see my colleagues, Justin just joined in and Doug as well. We're going to be going into those live Q&A right now. This is an example of what would happen when you log into your status checker, your student portal. In this case, Tina Fey has an outstanding application fee. So it's a $50 application fee. So she's able to submit that application fee payment through Binghamton in this case, based on how she applied. And as you scroll down, there's this application checklist. And there's a lot of stuff on this checklist. Not everybody will have this same looking checklist. This is, again, a test here. You're going to notice that there's different things that we have received already. So you have that checkbox and things that we're awaiting. And when you see that on your checklist, you actually can click on that and see that form. So this is why we really want to encourage you to set up that checklist. But there's an additional piece here. So if she had not done this, it would be here saying, submit your test optional form. The entire application would not be complete unless this bottom part, thank you for submitting your test optional form, was done. That is why you all need to do your application checklist. So I want to just bring up how you'll get an email once you submit your application on how to do this. It's a fairly straightforward process, though I know it can be confusing because there's a lot of moving parts. Always feel free to go back. This is right on the Binghamton admissions page about activate your admissions count. This is where you'll see the steps in order of what you need to do. Basically, in that email, you're going to get your student ID, which is basically your first letter of your first name, part of your last name, and a number, right? So that's going to be your ID that you log in to set up a password. And there's 8 steps here, but really the first 5 are what you need to do on point, right? Going to this one page, password.binghamton.edu, where you go through the steps. You're going to get a code, not a PIN. If you're getting a PIN, you're doing the wrong step here. A code, CODE, right? You're going to get a code to confirm your application, your password. And once you go back and confirm that, then you could go down to the status link. This is to check your application status, and you'll be using that password. All right. So The financial aid form, I just want to put this out there. I could throw it into the chat in just a second. You should all be getting to that stage if you have applied to submit your financial aid documents. So this is how you apply for financial aid. This is how you set up the FAFSA. If you've not started that already, there's a whole lot of information on our financial aid page. This is where you'll see a general overview of what the FAFSA is. I know I'm scrolling through this quickly. It's going to tell you all the benefits of doing this and what you could be eligible for. And this is going beyond just even the Binghamton specifics here. So definitely tune into that and ask us questions if you have that. Now, I mentioned fee waivers earlier. Again, Binghamton, we're a public university. We're not providing fee waivers, but we're able to approve fee waivers if you meet the state set standards, which again, we're a SUNY school. So the SUNY fee waiver form is a pretty straightforward version of this. It's based on annual income, which I know is not necessarily the fairest way of looking at this, but it's set by our state that we're a part of. So you can go through the number of people in the household and what the annual income is, and you can see there if you qualify for the SUNY fee waiver. That could be if you applied via the SUNY app, you send that to SUNY Central Processing Center. If you applied to Binghamton through the Common App or the Coalition app, but you still wanted to use the SUNY fee waiver, you can do so, meaning you qualify based on the income standards. That will just have to be sent directly to Binghamton. It could be sent via email from your high school for that matter, but it's just a form that you would fill out and get signed by you as a student and the person in the household. You would also need your school to sign this, all right? Your college, if you're transferring, or your high school, that verifies that. Common fee waiver that we see is a NACAC fee waiver. This works quite well for a lot of students because it gives you a little bit more variation of what you can be approved for. It's same thing. You got to fill out all this information. It's sent specifically to a school, but you're going to see the economic needs section here. There's a number of different variabilities that you can check off, whether you're eligible for a testing fee waiver, if you're part of a free and reduced lunch plan at your school, if you're a ward of the state, right? These are opportunities that you can check off on. There is an other section. I will say this as a warning. Again, Binghamton is only able to approve fee waivers set by the state standards. If you're checking off other, we know there's a lot of financial hardship, especially this year. You have to be very mindful that it's not going to be guaranteed to be approved just because you check that off. And that actually is the trickiest part of this all. For example, if there was a loss of employment, which we know a lot of families have gone through that could be approved. There needs to be supporting documentation eventually set. So you might not be approved initially. Then you have to send a supporting document, a letter from your employer. Other standards could have to be met there. So just keep that in mind. And that's why I always recommend that, yes, Binghamton, we want to make sure that you can get to our institution, and that if there's a barrier, particularly a financial barrier, we're helping you overcome those. Make sure of all the schools on your list, you're asking every school for their policy. Again, a lot of private schools may have a lot more leeway in the ability to approve these because they're not subject to a state review there at the end of the day. And then in addition to that, make sure that of the schools that you may have to pay the fee waiver for, these are definitely schools you want to be at, right? This is not about just collecting application admissions trophies. You got to really be mindful about this. This is why I always tell students, if you're doing a good job with your search in the beginning, that beginning phases, your application list should be a solid list, but not a list that you can't even remember the names of the schools on your list, right? There, in some students' cases, that might be 3 or 4 schools that you apply to. In others, it might be 12. I don't know. It might be a little more, it might be a little less, depending on your situation and where you're coming from. But you don't want this to be an extra numerous list that you're worried about all these documents for each individual school. All right. I know we've been speaking for, or at least I've been speaking for quite a bit, and there's a lot of questions out there. So Doug, and I know Justin, you're in here now. I see that you have marked some for live. Are there any that you want to touch on specifically? And then I could always answer some of those too.
Thank you all for sending your questions. We've answered 87 questions so far. First question that we have from Chloe here is, how will a student, or when will a student be notified if any items are missing from the application?
Yeah, those are things that you'll see right on your status checker, and they come in right away in the sense that once we know it's missing, we're going to throw that on your status checker. We will email you to say, check your status checker. You have documents that you need to submit. And that might come in, especially when I mentioned the EOP pathway, educational opportunity pathway. That could be a ever varying case. You might be complete one week, and then next week you're incomplete because there's another document that we're requiring. So either check your email every day or know that you should be checking your status checker every now and then. And my colleague Justin on the other end is a big, very involved in our EOP process, and he will be somebody that will be reaching out as well. It might be coming from your admissions counselor directly, like our different areas that we represent. Doug is in an out-of-state area. I'm in the New York City area. Justin covers a lot of upstate New York. So you might be getting some of that directly from your counselor via email.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Another question we have here is, can you talk a little bit more about how looking at extracurriculars and other things in the application are viewed now with the test optional world that we now live in?
Yeah, so extracurriculars, frankly, are one of my favorite things to look at. When I'm opening up an application, I just want to know what you're doing. I want to know what gets you excited, what inspires you. Yes, your essay may showcase some of that, but just start with this. Extracurriculars are not the reason why you're admitted to a college. It's not based on what did you do that makes you a good applicant. But frankly, it's helping you figure out where maybe you want to go in college, what you might want to do in college. It helps the colleges understand what's your typical day in the life, particularly outside the classroom, because we can see what your classroom life is like based on your transcript and maybe your letter of recommendation from a school official. Your extracurriculars, though, are giving us a better sense of what are some of those other things that get you excited or responsibilities that you have that give us a better context of what your home life is like. If you're taking care of a sibling or siblings or an elderly family member, especially now, right? Or maybe taking care of a neighbor down the hall in your apartment building because they can't go out and get groceries. Again, especially now, these are extracurriculars. Maybe it's a club or an organization that you're a big member of or a founder of. That's something that we want to know. Or if you're a 3-sport athlete and that's something you're excited about, let us know about that. That's on your extracurricular list. If you have the ability to do a really cool research project or start a company, I've seen quite a few of those these days. We want to know about that. But there's no one like magic formula. You need to have X level of extracurriculars in order to be a good admitted student to a place like Binghamton. And we know a lot of those extracurriculars are different than what you expected them to be. Lots have been canceled or suspended or paused or just not functional right now in the world that we're living in. That's okay. You can tell us maybe what you were hoping to do, but ultimately find another thing, a thing that you can fill that time with, not because we want you to be busy, but because we want you to be developing as a person as well, not just an academic.
And that ties into the next question, do you value a more well-rounded applicant? And I would agree with, everything that you just said. Definitely try to put as much on your application as possible. It's going to be the way that we really get to know you. There's plenty of applications that I've come across where students have put 0 to like 2 things under their extracurricular activities. And it really, no students do a lot more than that, even if it's just, taking care of your siblings at home or stuff like that. You can certainly put it on your application to let us know, because like I said, that's really going to be the way to get to know you. So,
yes. And if you are inspired by being a well-rounded student, right, if that's your thing, you like being involved in many different things, then yeah, we want to see that. If you are not, right, if you like to kind of stay in your particular lane and do well in whatever that lane is, that's fine too, especially at a university, right? I'll be clear, like we're looking for our entire incoming class to be well-rounded because we want everybody to bring in different perspectives. So it's a little different for us at Binghamton than maybe some very specific colleges in the sense of what they're offering, what they're looking for.
Great. Another question here is for our juniors who are on the line today. Just any tips on searching for colleges for our current juniors who are on?
Yes. And I want all of you to always be in that search mode, even if you're seniors, right? Searching for that right fit is a different way of looking at it. Juniors and even sophomores, you can start this in a way that we've never been able to do this before. Meaning you can show up on a college campus, virtually at the very least, every single day, all right, after school. Make it a fun pride, like make it a thing. Like I'm going to spend some time on this college website, even though I never heard of it before. Oh, what are their virtual opportunities? Let me start looking at this. Oh, I really like what's going on this campus. But in terms of like starting with a framework, You don't need to know what you want to major in, right? You don't have to make that determination right now. But if you have an idea of maybe what you want to do in the future, or maybe you're geared more towards the sciences or more towards the humanities, start with some basic, yes, Google searches of schools in particular regions, right? You might want to check public universities in your home state. If it's New York, great. If it's not, or the Northeast, check each state for the public schools. Also look for some of the private institutions. You want a variation here. Gearing it around academics first gives you some framework. If you're totally unsure about what you might want to do, which is perfectly fine, you're probably going to gear towards at least starting with the bigger universities because they're going to give you a lot of options. And then spending some time on those web pages, you're going to notice, all right, I like the array of offerings, or wow, this is way too much. And then you might start honing it down a little bit. But make sure you're dedicating some time to escaping your home place for whatever it is and virtually going to visit these schools. Yes, you can do some of this in person, but right now for a junior, it's not extra beneficial to be showing up on a college campus just to get a structural feel. I want you to spend some time getting a more well-rounded approach of what that school could offer. And I think this is the time frame that, this is an awakening for the college exploration phases that you all are going to benefit from this for sure.
Awesome. Another question we have here, when looking at grades and test scores, do you compare them to the grades of others who got into the same high school as the applicant, or do you compare them to the scores that you get overall?
So we don't do a whole lot of comparison at all, meaning we're not necessarily trying to compare you to another student because frankly, you all are your own individual combination of events, of minds, of different things that make you you. Yes, we are going to look at you relative to your high school based on what your high school offers, but not necessarily comparatively to your high school class. For Binghamton, there is no quota by high school. 40,000 students applying, it could vary by high school how many of each of those students from a particular high school applied. It could be anywhere from 900 from one high school to 1 from one high school, right? So we're not in the realm of like, all right, who's the best of? We're looking at who did the best with what they had in front of them. And that's up to you to determine. And in terms of scores, particularly comparing students, ones may have submitted SAT scores and ones who did not, we're not using that as a sort of determining factor. We're in this year, for this upcoming year, we're only looking at what you did submit. And that is what we're reviewing for your application, right? We're not comparing one student to the other or reserving spots for some students over another. I see one up here. So it does not submitting SAT scores and a personal statement as a transfer student reduce my chances of getting accepted.
So before you answer that question, Craig, if you look at the next one, I saved these last two transfer questions because we have some transfer students here.
Yeah.
The question below that is, how does the application process for transfer students differ from first-year students? If you want to address that one first, and then that kind of ties into that other question as well.
Yes, thank you there. And look, Binghamton, we are a transfer-heavy school, friendly school, whatever you want to call it. We have many transfer students. Actually, we were built that way. We're different than most selective R1 research universities, though, right? We're built to have many transfer students every single year come to our campus. That's what makes us who we are. 30 or so, 25-30% of our students are transfer students, usually doing very well wherever they're at. Maybe they were admitted initially to Binghamton, decided to go elsewhere and bring all that new academic talent to our institution. So it's a very straightforward process. We have spring transfers coming in for the spring term and fall transfers, which is probably the bigger incoming transfer class coming in for the fall terms. We have 6 academic colleges, so the variations of the review may vary based on the college that you're looking to apply for. For transfer students, you're typically on a direct path for a major by the time you're applying as a transfer. So there's some nuances that can come into play based on what you're applying for. But generally, we're looking for a straightforward review of who you are. Your application as a transfer is a little bit more condensed than it would be as a first-year student. We don't require a writing sample or an essay, but you could submit that. And we don't require SAT scores for this year. Traditionally, though, and this could go back onto the live scene again, For a transfer student who has under 24 college credits, which is generally 1 year of college, if you have less than 1 year or about 1 year completed in a college environment, we will look at your high school performance, including your test scores. Well, time will tell about the future of this, but right now, test scores are not needed for review as a transfer student.
A couple of questions we've gotten in regards to the EOP program is, one just popped up. If they apply for the EOP program and get denied for the program, do they get moved to the regular consideration, regular decision pool? I don't know if you want to touch on that real quick.
Yes. And Justin, if you have anything to add, you can add it right after this. So EOP, the Educational Opportunity Program, is an amazing program. It's an incredibly successful program at Binghamton. We have generally around 100 to maybe 150, depending on the year, students in our EOP pathway coming in. A lot of students will apply for EOP. Frankly, a lot of students are eligible for EOP. Binghamton academically has the highest EOP averages. So you might be EOP eligible based on your grades for Binghamton, but not for other SUNYs or each HEOP schools based on your grades overall. You might be a regular student for those other schools. So rest assured, we have a lot of really talented students coming through EOP. We're looking for that pathway. I recommend that if you think you qualify for EOP, financially, it's a straightforward review. It's based on number of people in the household and total income, right? You can look that right up on the SUNY.edu page or Binghamton's EOP page on our admissions page. It'll give you the breakdown. Check financials first, see if you qualify. And two, academically, if you think you may qualify, and one way to look at this, generally speaking, every year it's a slightly different variation, but EOP students last year, the majority fell between like an 85 high school average up to like a 93 high school average. Really good students. So again, that might mean you're not EOP elsewhere, but you might be EOP for Binghamton. You should mark off EOP and go through that process. The earlier, the better, because first and foremost, we're academically going to review and say, hey, is this a good fit for you? If we think you're above our EOP standards, we're not denying you to EOP. We're just moving you over to regular decision. And that's a good spot to be because we think that would be your best pathway. If you're denied to EOP, that means you would have been denied to regular or other programs. It's not the end of the world. That means we think there's a better fit for you out there, at least initially. In fact, a lot of students who may have not gotten into EOP, we will see right down the road in a year or maybe 2 years as a transfer student to Binghamton, coming even from some other EOP programs. So yes, if you're denied to EOP, that means this wasn't the right fit pathway, but we may move you out of EOP based on your academics or your financial qualifications to a regular admissions review at some point. So the earlier the better for EOP, because this does take a lot of time. Earlier the better to submit your application.
We got another question here. A student submitted scores to other schools, but they don't want to submit them to Binghamton. Do they just take them off the Common App when they apply, or just fill out the test option and then fill out the test option form? So just to touch on that, you won't be able to remove them from the Common Application. Once you submit your Common App, it's done. There's no editing it. We will just not look at it and not mark it down in our system, anything like that. It's going to remain in your application, but we won't take it into consideration when reviewing your application. So you will still need to go in and fill out the test optional form to let us know that you don't want those taken into consideration.
Yes. Is there something separate, like an essay, that you would have to submit if you want to apply for the honors program? So Binghamton has many different sort of intimate, nuanced, specialized programs. Some of those are first-year review-based programs, meaning they're invite only. You don't apply to any of them. Our scholars programs, our first-year research immersion program, our source program, first-year research for students in the humanities. You do not need to submit any extra documentation or anything of the sort. We are going to look at all of our applicants for any of these spots. We know that there are many other spots down the line for different programs. So rest assured, you're going to find a pathway. We know that at Bing for whatever it is that you're super interested in. But I will just put this point of recommendation out there. If Binghamton is a school that's high on your list, you really are excited about Bing, you looked into things and you saw things like the scholars program that you are really interested in, or our first year research program, you could send us a note, an email. You can jump on one of our Zoom meetings, and we have them every day, where you could talk to a counselor like ourselves here, and we could talk about that, the different pathways. It doesn't mean that you're automatically getting a spot because you expressed interest, but I will recommend for those of you who are really interested in Binghamton, we eventually want to hear about that interest. And you could do that via an email. You could do that just checking in, tuning into events like these. They add up over time because we're cognizant of that. We're aware of that. And in the long run, it wouldn't hurt, right? To make sure that the schools that are high on your list know that. All right. I just saw one come in. An international student wanted to know whether you can still apply without the TOEFL. Depending on your situation, as an international student, there are extra requirements just on the English proficiency, but you can do a Duolingo exam. I think it's like $50. It's pretty straightforward to do that. The Duolingo is a new addition for English proficiency, so you don't need to submit a TOEFL. The international team, though, my colleagues on the international team will be able to answer that specifically about where your unique situation is and what you might be needed to still have submitted. I'm not quite sure of the test score requirements from the international side there. So, but generally speaking, we're going to post all of our middle 50% ranges on our admissions page. They do vary year to year. Yes, Binghamton is going to have some of the higher standards. These are not necessarily requirements. It's just giving you an idea of who that typical student is. So these are things that I think that you're all on the right path for, because you're tuning in, you're learning about these. You're showing up. In the chat, I'm going to throw a link to our general admissions account, as well as, and Justin and Doug, if we can find the links to our main admissions page, will bring you to the Zoom chat. So if you have a question you want to go into like a one-on-one discussion with, definitely meet us during the day, usually between 10 and 5 during the weekday, 10 and 5 on Eastern Standard Time. We'll be able to meet with you in a breakout room, discuss the things that you're maybe nervous about, curious about, things you want to let us know. So we'll be able to meet you there on any given day. So on the visit.binghamton.edu page that Justin just put in there, it's like not even a quarter of the way down the page, you'll see those links that they'll take you right into a Zoom chat. You can even schedule an appointment if that works for you. Our admit email is a really good starting point. We usually get that assigned to a counselor. You could go on our main admissions page and see who your admissions counselor is. Doug, you can talk about your territories in a second. And Justin, if you wanted to say yours, but I cover the 5 boroughs of New York City, as well as the Westchester County area. I'm joined by my colleague, Alex Ma. So you might hear from Alex or myself if you're in one of those areas.
I also just put a link in to our Campus 360 virtual tour for those of you who want to check out campus but can't quite make it up. We have a very safe option for you in terms of our campus tour. So our Campus 360 virtual tour. So I just put that in the chat. I cover personally, if there's anyone tuning in from Pennsylvania, Delaware, or Illinois, I am your counselor and very happy to answer any questions. You can always feel free to reach out to me directly and help me to answer any of your questions.
I forgot about my Rhode Islanders too. I cover Rhode Island too.
Do you really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And Justin, he covers the majority of New York, outside of typically the boroughs, Long Island and Westchester. But Justin is everywhere at all times, so you'll hear from Justin. Hey, Justin.
Hi, everybody. Happy holidays. So as Craig mentioned, I do cover a lot of New York. I also assist with, as you mentioned earlier, review with the Education Opportunity Program, EOP. So if you're reaching out to me, just say, for example, if I don't get back to you right away, feel free, because I do cover a large area, feel free to bump your message back up, or you can email admit at binghamton.edu. I know Craig put it in the panelists or the chat, and then ask for me specifically, and somehow, some way you'll get to me, and I'll make sure you get to it.
Yes, and I'm going to thank you, Justin, for that. And Justin, that's a good point. If you did not get a response and it's been a few days, don't feel ashamed by sending it again. I know I get a lot of emails. I see that number 2 pop up. Then I at least want to make sure we're getting to that. And if you didn't get a response from one person, yes, it's okay to kind of reach out to maybe the admin account at that point, because you're like, hey, I just want to get something cleared up, or join us in Zoom where you can get that direct answer very likely. I see a few more questions popped in before we close out. I know we're a little over on time. I just want to make sure these are some good questions that we're thinking about. Is there a disadvantage to applying closer to the deadline, less likely to be accepted or earn scholarship? Technically, no. I mean, look, if we have a deadline, which the upcoming deadline will be January 15th, we tend to be a little bit more flexible if you need to get documentation in after that. As long as your application is in by the deadline, we're going to be flexible with you. We know this is a difficult year. We know last year was a difficult year, and it's compounding onto each other. There is not a disadvantage to applying closer to the deadline. We want you not to rush this. We want you to be confident in your application and how you apply. The thing I want to point out, though, is if you're ready to go, the advantage is now, right? Meaning we're not reserving X number of scholarship for students later on. Some schools might do that. So it's a good question there, Catalina, because you might want to be checking in with every school on your list. Is there a scholarship deadline? For Binghamton, no, there's not. We're not reviewing scholarship based on when you applied per se. We're looking at your FAFSA. It's essentially what we're looking at here for a lot of our financial aid and support. But you want to make sure that you're getting your application in a timely manner. The deadline itself is guarantee you a full review. If it came in after, say, January 15th, it's not that we're throwing your application out, but you're getting into a shorter time review window, and that might not help your application along. Are you accepting early acceptances for juniors? So juniors, your time to apply will start in August of this upcoming year. That's usually when the applications open. Common App, Coalition App, SUNY App, usually around then. That's when you can start submitting your application for Binghamton. There's no earlier time frame to apply. We want you to complete your junior year, obviously go in with some momentum, but you can log into those application platforms ahead of that just to get a feel for it. They're pretty straightforward, but it would be August 2021 is when that typically opens up. Excellent. These were good questions. I see 140 something questions, 43 questions are answered. That means you all hopefully were listening, but thinking, and that's great. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Justin, for that. Always check in with us whenever you are curious about Bing, especially the seniors right now. This is crunch time. We know it's tough. Check your email, set up your status checker. Test optional form is a must for this year. All right. Good luck, everybody. I'm glad to see you at least here. Hopefully we'll see you all soon, virtually, in person, whatever that might be. Take care. Happy holidays to everybody coming up and those celebrating right now. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.